Since the last time we spoke, I know your team of researchers went and did some work. I wanted to ask you some questions about this. You did some research on the impact of 1 minute breath work. How does this impact our heart rate variability, and how does HRV impact our anxiety?
Let's talk about heart rate variability because it's an important thing. So your brain is trying to control and predict everything that's taking place in your life, because stress is actually created when you can't predict something, you can't control something, or you have the perception that something's going to get worse. Okay, so you switch on that primitive nervous system, the fight or flight nervous system, and as you shift your attention from one person to another thing, to another place, to another problem, every one of those different elements has a neurological network in your brain. So the arousal of the hormones to say, pay attention, there's danger. As you start shifting your attention to each one of these elements that have neurological networks in your brain starts firing very incoherently. And in fact, you could actually, by thinking about your problems, turn on the stress response just by thought alone. And that's what most people do. So now there you are, you're sitting in traffic. The heart is pumping because it's trying to get blood to the extremities, because a primitive system is switching on, saying that there's a predator, there's danger. And the heart is beating against closed arteries. And the heart starts beating out of rhythm, it starts beating out of order, and it starts beating very incoherently. So when you have incoherence in the brain, and you have incoherence in the heart, when waves are incoherent, when they intersect with each other, they cancel each other out. And when they cancel each other out, that's less energy in the brain. If there's less energy in the brain, you're going to default to some of those reflexive systems. If energy is diminished in the heart, you're not going to trust. You're not going to be vulnerable. You're not going to want to commune. You're not going to want to connect. You're not going to want to feel grateful. It's not a time to feel any of those things. It's time to run, fight, and hide. Okay, so most people say, okay, well, I had a stressful day. I was stressed out the entire day. And at the end of the day, they turn on the TV and they relax. The important thing to realize is that if you're relying on something outside of you to change that emotional state, you'll become dependent on it. So is it possible then to begin to create more coherence in the brain? And the answer is yes, because when you're under the gun of those chemicals of survival, you're narrowing your focus on the cause. You hear something moving in the bushes, you freeze, and you narrow your focus. And it's that narrowing of focus that tends to be obsessive. When we're in stress, we overthink things, we overanalyze. That actually, we've discovered, makes the brain worse. And it actually makes the heart regulate more out of order. So then we said, okay, if the brain is narrowing its focus and it's becoming over-attentive, what if we teach it how to do something else? What if we teach it how to broaden its focus? And instead of focusing on something material or something known, just open up and focus on nothing. And the act of broadening the focus actually causes a person to stop thinking and doing and start sensing and feeling, is actually what starts to slow their brain waves down. The redundancy of shifting your attention from one person, to another problem, to another thing, causes the brain to fire like a lightning storm in the clouds very incoherently. So as you start to open your awareness and sense nothing, we've seen this thousands of times, those different networks that are firing out of order start to synchronize. And what syncs in the brain links in the brain, and the brain becomes more orderly. It starts to become more coherent. If you could learn how to rest your attention in your heart, and where you place your attention is where you place your energy, regulate your breath, start slowing your breathing down, even if you did it for 1 minute, you could actually begin to change your brain waves, and you could actually cause your heart to start functioning more regulation and more order. If you said, okay, I'm going to work with my body, and I'm going to start breathing, and I'm going to start feeling emotions that I do want to feel. Yes, it may take you a few minutes to get there, but if you keep practicing it over and over again, the heart starts producing a very profound signal. It starts to produce an external magnetic field. It's measurable. So now you have a coherent brain, which means you can get very intentional. And you have a coherent heart, which means you can feel the emotions of your future before it happens. Somehow you have this broadcasting of this Wi-Fi signal. And the brain tends to be electrical in nature, so it sends out an electrical charge into the field. The heart is the magnetic charge. It's what draws things to us. It's the magnetic field. And now you actually, by changing the way you think and the way you feel, you're changing the signal in the field. And if you're able to maintain that state for an extended period of time, I say something magical is going to happen in your life. Something unusual, some unknown experience is going to occur. If you keep thinking the same way and feeling the same way, your life should stay the same. So we do 1-minute practices, we do 5-minute practices, we do 30-minute practices. We want to get so good at doing it with our eyes closed that we can do it with our eyes open.
Yeah, no, when I hear that, like I've had personal, genuine experience of that, where I've done that when I'm having a moment where I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling stressed or, something unpredictable has happened and I feel that change in my heart rate. And I notice my breathing change. I notice it become more shallow. I notice it become more random. I know that when I'm practicing breath work, I'm able to come back to stillness. I'm able to come back to that sense of balance. And then I'm able to actually approach the issue at hand with more clarity, with more connectedness and a feeling of confidence. But when someone else who may not have had that experience yet or may not be trained in that, they're just thinking, well, how do I solve the problem, right? Like they're listening to me and you going, well, but I can't because I need to solve this problem. Like you're saying, like, oh, I'm going to be 30 minutes late for a job interview, or I just had an argument with my partner this morning and I've got a big presentation this morning as well at work. Now I'm stressed about it because I'm thinking about that. Or my kid just I had to rush him to hospital and now I'm late. Like, I guess when you're looking at it from a very human point of view, it's really hard to understand the value in this. What do you say to anyone who's thinking and feeling that way?
No, I think it's a reasonable conversation. Yeah. I mean, sometimes we have to be super aroused, and sometimes we really have to pay attention. And sometimes there are threats and dangers where that primitive nervous system actually works in our favor, and that's the emergency system. But you got to also realize that you only have a certain amount of energy. And if you're living in emergency mode for an extended period of time, there's no energy for growth and repair. There's no energy for long-term building projects. And so when it's needed and you have to outrun the predator, you go. Yeah. You don't sit and try to make friends with the predator. We're not that good. You run, right? Yeah. The problem is if you keep that alarm system switched on all the time, it gets very addictive.
It's a great answer.